This episode comes with a freebie. You'll find the ideal client profile one-pager at podknows.co.uk/ideal-client. Enjoy! Let's talk about Jane.
I've poured my heart into this branded podcast, but where are the results?
Now, Jane's a real person. She's a real business owner and a real client. The only thing that's not real about her is her name. I've made it up to save embarrassment and to stop personally shaming somebody who had all the right ideas, but maybe lacked a little bit in the execution. Let's get into it. So Jane spent 20 grand on her podcast between when she started it and quite recently. And Jane reached out to me because her financial advisor had pointed out that she spent that 20 grand and got 6 grand back in revenue. Now, obviously, those numbers didn't add up, and that's given her cause for concern, understandably. And so as a result, she's now just a few weeks away from calling it a day on the show. But as I would push back on Jane, and I'd push back on you if you're in the same predicament, the problem isn't in the numbers. The problem is in understanding where the problem is. Now, people like Jane, they tend to have lots of specialists surrounding them. Those self-help books have probably got a lot to blame for this, but obviously you're encouraged to surround yourself with people that are excellent at what they do. What is it? You are the sum of the 5 people you hang around with the most, or some bobbins like that, which sounds great in a book, but probably isn't realistic in real life. The issue is when those specialists are kind of the result of just being really good at selling you an idea rather than being people that you actually need to help you in terms of their specialisms. So let's face it, most of us have probably got these things going on: SEO, emails, website, podcast, YouTube, social media, Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram Reels, you name it, all these things. But do they all need specialists helping you with working on them? Now, the ironic thing is that the podcast is the thing that's actually in the right channel. But the problem begins when that podcast isn't given a job. So it just sits there, gathering dust, while everything around it, the emails, the Pinterest, the Facebook, the empty LinkedIn page, all of it just spins aimlessly in its own little world. So in this episode of B2B Podcasting Insights, I'm going to share with you what I feel the solution to this problem could be. Hi there, welcome to B2B Podcasting Insights. I'm Neal Veglio, the founder of Podknows Podcasting. We are a podcast agency that specializes in helping people like you, brands, businesses, founders, get better results from their podcasting efforts. Let's talk about content marketing for most businesses and brands. Most founders start with, well, what channels should we be on? And then once they figured out what channels they feel they should be on, they then hire in the specialists to help them leverage those channels. And then they wonder why nothing's working. Well, the simple answer to that is they've got it arse about face. Here's the correct approach to setting this up. The right sequence is, first of all, understanding who are we trying to reach? Where are they? And which channels are they actually on? So essentially, if you think about it like a map, a content map, you build that map first, and then you hire the people that can help you get from A to B to C to D on that map. And the problem with Jane and many people like her that are founders that are really ambitious about growing their businesses, they know they want to use content to help do that. They build the machinery to travel on the map before they've plotted out the journey. Now let's talk about these specialists as individuals. I mean, let's be honest about it. We all excel at our own specialisms. We wouldn't be doing it for a living if we didn't. And most specialists truly believe, they're not trying to scam you, but they truly believe their thing is the answer to your problem. But it might not be. Let's be honest about it, they're incentivized to convince you that their thing is the thing that you need to grow your business. It puts food on their table. Everyone's got to make a living. I'm not mocking them for it. I'm not criticizing them for it. But when it comes to you, that's where the due diligence and the insight and knowledge, the research, the getting the data straight is so important for the growth of your business. I mean, taking, for example, Pinterest. There are lots of people out there that specialize in growing Pinterest, that specialize in growing Instagram grids. But the problem is, if your ideal client is rarely on Pinterest and rarely on Instagram, kind of a waste of time. Doesn't matter how great they are at growing Pinterest channels, at growing Pinterest boards, at building beautiful looking grids on Instagram. And so the danger is that you end up with around 10 or more people executing on making your wrong channels the best they can be, and in the process burning cash that didn't need to be burned on reaching people that you're never going to want to reach. And that's going to lead to zero results. And you feeling heartache, being bitter, resentful, having sleepless nights. Oh my God, why is none of this working? I've invested so much money in making this happen, but I'm not getting results from it. Of course you're not getting results from it. Your ideal customers are not in the places you're shouting in. And the problem is amplified when someone is giving you financial advice, maybe an accountant, a financial advisor, financial director. They're just looking at the numbers as black and white digits on a spreadsheet and going, why are you spending money on this thing that's not working? The thing is, the thing might be working, just not yet. And to be honest, I can pretty much guarantee it's not the podcast that's broken, it's the channel selection that the podcast is feeding into. And now let's be real here, for most brands, and I say most, not every brand, but for most brands, the podcast is really a wonderful opportunity. It's a content powerhouse. You can literally get your podcast to do the majority of heavy lifting in your marketing, in your thought leadership, in your brand awareness. But if it has no job, if you've not identified the job that that podcast should be doing for you in your wider business goals, then it's just going to end up drifting into all the other noise that those other channels are creating. So the solution to this problem is never, well, let's just kill the podcast. We're not getting results from it. The solution usually is kill the other channels that are not doing us any good and focus those resources on the podcast and the other channels that work well with the podcast to get us the results that we want. Now, in Jane's case, I personally believe that is going to be LinkedIn and it's going to be email newsletter and YouTube. The reason being, none of her ideal clients, usually people spending a fortune on consultancy in a pretty highbrow space, none of these people are looking at Pinterest building boards. They are literally in their car, driving to meeting after meeting, and they've got podcasts playing on their car dashboard through Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. They may be looking at YouTube when they're in their house trying to kill some time. Probably less so, but there's more of a possibility that they're going to be on YouTube than they're going to be on Pinterest. They're also going to be answering emails. So great, get them on your email list. So now we've gone from Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, email, podcast, to podcast, LinkedIn, emails, YouTube. Much easier to manage and a much more increased likelihood that that is going to work. All right, it's time for the part of the show where we take questions from the general public who get in touch with us via podknows.co.uk/voicemail and ask us questions. If they're a founder, if they're somebody that's working in a marketing team that has a podcast, this is the place to ask those questions, and let's get to it. This one's from Jordan in Dublin, who's a solopreneur, has been recording for 3 months.
Hi, Neal. I've recorded about 15 episodes now, but every time I sit down to hit record, I get nervous and my stomach gets all tied up in little knots. I second guess what I'm about to say, and I end up doing multiple takes, which takes forever. How on earth do you get over this?
Well, Jordan, here's the thing. You don't. At least not completely, ever. But you stop letting it stop you. Now, what you didn't see when I recorded this episode is the setting up of the lighting, the setting up of the microphone here, making sure that everything looks and sounds the way that it needs to sound and look on the final episode. And that took me about 30 minutes of try, test, no, not good, iterate, try again. Most people wouldn't get past the first time of that. I did it 4 times before I got it right. And that's a barrier which increases your anxiety and nervousness, which prevents you from getting on with the thing. Now, that procrastination, that nervousness about getting it right, it's not a flaw. It's a sign that you actually care. And those of us that actually care are the ones that get the better results. Those that just get into it and record, they're the ones that don't care if it lands or not. And therefore, they're not going to get the same level of results as you, Jordan, who is really taking care about what you're going to do, what you're going to put out there, and you want it to work for you. And of course, the more you record, you're not necessarily going to sound massively better on take 3 than you did on take 1. But it's just that you got more confidence in what you were saying because you now know the script off by heart. So here's what I want you to do to try and help with this anxiety around recording. Read through your script a few times so that essentially you're treating it like you're going to a networking event and you're relaying that information one-to-one with human beings rather than on a microphone. Then commit to recording it once. It might not be perfect, but at least it's going to get the most of the information across and you'll get it done. The practice comes longer term. Don't use each recording session as an opportunity to practice again and again and again and strive for perfection. Got to tell you, perfection is always a journey. It's never a destination. Here's the thing, that nervousness, it's going to be with you even after you do that one take. But I tell you what, it's no longer going to control you. Good luck, Jordan. It's time for this week's quick tip. Now, I'm guilty of this myself pretty much every single week, so I'm being a massive hypocrite. But, like the Genesis song says, do as I say, don't do as I do. When you're publishing your podcast, don't do it on the day that you recorded. Wait at least 3 days. Listen to it with fresh ears that are in a different modality from when you record it, because now, 3 days later, you're listening to it with a slightly more objective viewpoint. You're less engaged with it on an emotional level. You're listening as a listener rather than the creator. You'll then hear things that you didn't pick up on the first time when you recorded it. Sometimes it could be as simple as something that you said in the recording that may not be accurate, but you didn't pick up on it because your brain is just trying to get to the end of the recording and get this thing done. 3 days later, you will pick up on it. Trust me on that. 3 days later creates distance. Distance creates perspective. And perspective notices mistakes that creation doesn't. So again, if you want to get a hold of the ideal client profile one-pager, then get yourself to podknows.co.uk/ideal-client. Well, I hope you found this episode useful. If you did, make sure that you share it with somebody else that you know is creating a podcast for their business, whether they're a founder, whether they're in the marketing team at a brand. Hopefully they will find it equally useful. And also, if you haven't done it yet, leave us a review in whatever podcast app or YouTube, whatever you're listening to or watching this in. Until the next episode, good luck with your continuing quest to achieve success with your B2B podcast.